and they always conversed with confidence. His chief reward for the painful exertion of disclosing past sorrows and present humiliations was given in the pitying eye with which Marianne sometimes observed him, and the gentleness of her voice whenever, though it did not often happen, she was obliged, or could oblige herself, to speak to him. These assured him that his exertion had produced an increase of goodwill towards himself, and these gave Eleanor hopes of its being farther augmented hereafter. But Mrs. Jennings, who knew nothing of all this, who knew only that the Colonel continued as grave as ever, and that she could neither prevail on him to make the offer himself, nor commission her to make it for him, began, at the end of 2 days, to think that, instead of midsummer, they would not be married till Michaelmas, and by the end of a week that it would not be a match at all. The good understanding between the Colonel and Miss Dashwood seemed rather to declare that the honours of the mulberry tree, the canal, and the yew arbour would all be made over to her, and Mrs. Jennings had, for some time, ceased to think at all of Mrs. Ferrars. Early in February, within a fortnight from the receipt of Willoughby's letter, Eleanor had the painful office of informing her sister that he was married. She had taken care to have the intelligence conveyed to herself as soon as it was known that the ceremony was over, as she was desirous that Marianne should not receive the first notice of it from the public papers, which she saw her eagerly examining every morning. She received the news with resolute composure, made no observation on it, and at first shed no tears. But after a short time they would burst out, and for the rest of the day she was in a state hardly less pitiable than when she first learnt to expect the event. The Willoughbys left town as soon as they were married, and Eleanor now hoped, as there could be no danger of her seeing either of them, to prevail on her sister, who had never yet left the house since the blow first fell, to go out again by degrees, as she had done before. About this time the two Miss Steeles, lately arrived at their cousin's house in Bartlett's Buildings, Holborn, presented themselves again before their more grand relations in Conduit and Berkeley Streets, and were welcomed by them all with great cordiality. Eleanor only was sorry to see them. Their presence always gave her pain, and she hardly knew how to make a very gracious return to the overpowering delight of Lucy in finding her still in town.
"I should have been quite disappointed if I had not found you here still,"
said she repeatedly, with a strong emphasis on the word.
"But I always thought I should. I was almost sure you would not leave London yet awhile, though you told me, you know, at Barton, that you should not stay above a month. But I thought at the time that you would most likely change your mind when it came to the point. It would have been such a great pity to have went away before your brother and sister came, and now, to be sure, you will be in no hurry to be gone. I am amazingly glad you did not keep to your word."
Eleanor perfectly understood her, and was forced to use all her self-command to make it appear that she did not.
"Well, my dear,"
said Mrs. Jennings.
"and how did you travel?"
"Not in the stage, I assure you,"
replied Miss Steele with quick exultation.
"We came post all the way, and had a very smart beau to attend us. Dr. Davies was coming to town, and so we thought we'd join him in a post-chaise, and he behaved very genteelly, and paid 10 or 12 shillings more than we did."
"Oh, oh!"
cried Mrs. Jennings.
"Very pretty indeed. And the doctor is a single man, I warrant you."
"There now,"
said Miss Steele, affectedly simpering.
"Everybody laughs at me so about the doctor, and I cannot think why. My cousins say they are sure I have made a conquest, but for my part, I declare, I never think about him from one hour's end to another. 'Lord, here comes your beau, Nancy,' my cousin said t'other day, when she saw him crossing the street to the house. 'My beau, indeed,' said I cannot think who you mean. The doctor is no beau of mine.'
"Ay, ay, that is very pretty talking, but it won't do. The doctor is the man, I see."
"No, indeed."
replied her cousin with affected earnestness.
And I beg you will contradict it if you ever hear it talked of.
Mrs. Jennings directly gave her the gratifying assurance that she certainly would not, and Miss Steele was made completely happy.
I suppose you will go and stay with your brother and sister, Miss Dashwood, when they come to town?
Said Lucy, returning after a cessation of hostile hints to the charge.
No, I do not think we shall.
Oh, yes, I dare say you will.
Elinor would not humour her by farther opposition.
What a charming thing it is that Mrs. Dashwood can spare you both for so long a time together.
Long a time indeed,
interposed Mrs. Jennings.
Why, their visit is but just begun.
Lucy was silenced.
I am sorry we cannot see your sister, Miss Dashwood,
said Miss Steele.
I am sorry she is not well.
For Marianne had left the room on their arrival.
You are very good. My sister will be equally sorry to miss the pleasure of seeing you, but she has been very much plagued lately with nervous headaches, which make her unfit for company or conversation.
Oh dear, that is a great pity. But such old friends as Lucy and me, I think she might see us, and I am sure we would not speak a word.
Elinor, with great civility, declined the proposal. Her sister was perhaps laid down upon the bed, or in her dressing-gown, and therefore not able to come to them.
Oh, if that's all,
cried Miss Steele,
we can just as well go and see her.
Elinor began to find this impertinence too much for her temper, but she was saved the trouble of checking it by Lucy's sharp reprimand, which now, as on many occasions, though it did not give much sweetness to the manners of one sister, was of advantage in governing those of the other. End of chapter 32.